As 2018 came along, I was still an anti-SJW, and I was still an easy target for the alt-right playbook. Moving on from that, let's talk about how being an anti-SJW was affecting my behavior, social ability, and view of myself, as we discuss 2018, also known as the year I started my YouTube channel. My anti-SJW mindset started to creep into the real world, and it wasn't pretty. I can't remember most of my real life interactions, but I'll try to note down as many as possible. For example, I'm vegetarian. When I was a late teen, I ate a lot of vegetarian meat. This mainly included vegetarian chicken, which contained soy. This resulted in me, and I kid you not, telling my mother, who I still lived with at the time, that, and I kid you not, I asked my mom if there was soy in the chicken, her answering yes, and then me saying that then I didn't want to eat it anymore. Listen, I know it's cringe, but there may have been a ton of other young boys, maybe there still are, that are actively avoiding products that contain soy out of the fear that it's gonna turn them into unhealthy betas. Now, I didn't have a lot of these, since I wasn't the biggest fan of confrontation or long-winded arguments that I just lacked the motivation or passion to have. Besides, when most people watch an informative video, they're not even able to repeat 90% of what was said in that video in an argument anyway. But the more I talked about it to my parents, the more I started to realize that the stuff I knew about really wasn't as mainstream as I thought. No one knew what I was talking about when I yammered on about the SJWs. I remember bringing up SJWs to my mom for the first time. This was a classic case of, well, what about the SJWs? I don't really remember the context of me bringing it up, but the point stands that my mom had no idea what SJWs were. I was genuinely shocked by that. It seemed like I had forgotten that SJW was just a pejorative term. I guess maybe it was because it was an acronym of social justice warrior. But the biggest reason was probably because I had seen so many videos of how people who they labeled SJWs were taking over. To me, you could only be an anti-SJW, an SJW, or a normie. And in my mind, SJWs had all the power, since they were supposedly getting people fired for wrong speak, or getting them banned from platforms. So many big celebrities were virtue signaling, and so many popular late night hosts acted like SJWs. So, in my mind, it was impossible not to have heard of them. Obviously, they also never heard of Antifa. So obviously when me and my father were having an argument about if Trump supported the KKK or not, my father was pretty confused when I brought up Antifa as evidence that the left commits more political violence than the right. Which the stats would disagree with, by the way. I also didn't get why I never heard anyone at my school mention SJWs. This led to me feeling kind of alone in my acquired political personality. I was the only anti-SJW, as I didn't hear anyone else talk about the quote-unquote regressive left. During the election, I had also frequently talked about how I hated Hillary Clinton. And you know, that's still true, I do still hate Hillary Clinton, but for different reasons now. Back then, the only reason why I talked about how bad Hillary was because I was sick of hearing everyone talk about Trump. It wasn't balanced well, in my opinion. Hillary just wasn't getting as much hate as she deserved. See, when everyone had kind of the same opinion on something, I always wanted to be the one who stands out. I probably wouldn't have admitted to that being the reason though. But what I do find interesting is that I got no shit for this. You know, with all the stories I'd heard about students getting absolutely shunned for daring to criticize the left, I'd expect I'd at least get into some semi-aggressive arguments with my teachers, right? From what I got, my teachers were actually very interested in hearing about my problems with Hillary, and they never dismissed my claims about her being homophobic and calling black men superpredators. Of course, that thought never crossed my mind. Anyway, after I realized that this anti-SJW thing was really just between me and the internet, it resulted in me feeling even more alienated, but it also resulted in me feeling an even stronger connection with the anti-SJW figures I was watching at the time. At this point, it would be very hard to pull me out of this ideology of hating feminism, Black Lives Matter, and anything even remotely progressive. And hard it was. My shift in views was anything but overnight. Because of my perception of how the, for the lack of a better word, normie public viewed anti-social justice, basically what I concluded is that they didn't know anything, but they all thought due to ignorance that feminism was good and Trump was bad. Basically, I felt like it was me versus the world. So, psychologically, I always walked around with a chip on my shoulder, scared of meeting potential SJWs and getting outcasted because of my views if I accidentally expressed them in social circles. I'd get into arguments with my teacher about the wage gap and feminism, and my teacher would shut me down pretty quick in arguments, which led me to believe there was just no arguing with these people. I gotta bottle all my opinions up, making me a more bottled up defensive person. I don't know this for sure, but I think my defensive personality would show up even when there wasn't a conversation even remotely related to politics. This could just be a theory, but I noticed that that defensive shit kind of went away when I stopped being an anti-SJW, and I'm pretty glad it did, because there was a lot of self-hatred and toxicity in me at the time when I still was an anti-SJW. At the time, I identified as, and prepare yourself for the cringe, a conservative Democrat. Yeah, I know. I mean, it's not like I knew what the term meant. I couldn't even be fucked to do like a couple simple Google searches to find out if this really was the identity I wanted to describe myself with. I just knew that I didn't want to identify as a liberal or a leftist because they were just too radical and snowflakey for me. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard it before. And I knew I didn't want to identify as a Republican because that just sounded too old-fashioned. And I did like the very vague idea I had of democracy, so I identified as a Democrat. And it's not like I wanted to conserve anything. I mean, deep down that's not what I wanted, but it's what I thought I wanted. This resulted in me taking an interest in conserving things. I wanted to conserve things like American values and stuff like gender. Ultimately, I wasn't being honest with myself. My cringy anti-SJW mindset also affected my humor pretty poorly. So, let's talk about my videos. Now, thankfully I can say I kind of grew out of it before I started doing commentary videos, or at the very least, political commentary videos. But without further ado, let's go over some examples, shall we? I think the first time I couldn't help but let it slip through was in the How to Swim If You Can't Swim video. Yeah, probably not the most obvious example.
Because I am sick and tired of your swim privilege and non-drown privilege.
Swim privilege and non-drown privilege. You get it. A corny privilege joke. Moving on.
I like this last movie, Rampage. That was pretty good. You should watch it. It's with a white gorilla. Diversity.
Oh God, why? Why, Zaid, why? Wait, completely off topic by the way, but why the fuck is the screen so stretched so horizontally?
This is my best impression. Like, he's like one of them emo.
You have a depression here?
Spanish emo in. Like one of those emo Spanish nerds. Like those emo white cats. Steve Shives looking ass. Now I'm triggered. You fucking digger. I'm diggered. Tiggered. BLM's, the official Black Lives Matter house. Well, that's where we're heading, right?
Yes.
We're hardcore Black Lives Matter supporters. Yeah, you're an All Lives Matter supporter, right?
Yeah.
What's your opinion on the right to own a gun?
The what?
The right to own a gun. What's your opinion?
I have no opinion.
My opinion is hell yeah! Manspreading. That also qualifies as manspreading. How do you feel, you sexist white male degenerate?
There's also a whole video on my second channel of me and Danny watching a Some Black Guy video, in which we say a lot of stupid shit. Now, reckon most of the dumb takes came from Danny because he was a lot more of an anti-SJW than me, so most of the dumb takes came from him. But what I want to do now is just go over the video and talk about how my views have changed.
Quote, if true, end quote, is rape culture. If true is due process. And that's one of those things that, like, it's kind of creepy. It's kind of scary that if true can be considered rape culture, like, oh, like you're doubting that.
I don't agree with that anymore. Here's where I say some stupid shit about the LGBT, so let's correct myself.
You know what it now is? LGBTQIA+.
Why? Why have to make it so difficult?
Yeah, I know Q stands for queer, which is kind of the same thing as gay, if you ask me.
Not really. It's an umbrella term for sexual minorities who are not heterosexual or cisgender. Originally meaning strange or peculiar, queer came to be used pejoratively against those with same-sex relationships or desires in the late 19th century. In the 2000s and on, queer became increasingly used to describe a broad spectrum of non-normative sexual and gender identities and politics. Academics such as queer theory and queer studies share a general opposition to binarism and normativity and a perceived lack of intersectionality, some of them only tangentially connected to the LGBT movement. Queer arts, queer cultural groups, and queer political groups are examples of modern queer identities. But I could see how I got that one wrong though, as years of watching commentary videos with a political semi-identitarian undertone did. Basically anti-feminist commentary videos. It has led me to think that ignorance is good, or confusion proves me right. You get what I'm talking about, right? Those videos where queer people, yes, queer people, not just gay people, because yes, there is a distinction. Anyway, where queer people talk about their gender identity, and someone, let's say, identifies as gender fluid, and some mouth breather behind a keyboard and a monitor starts laughing and kinda just takes pride in their own ignorance.
I identify as gender fluid.
Gender what? That's stupid, they're only men and women. Gender fluid. I don't know what that means, and I'm not gonna research it, even though a 2-second Google search could tell me what it is. I'm just gonna assume it's not a real thing, because I've never heard of it. And you should definitely let me, a lazy 15-year-old introverted boy who probably doesn't pay any attention in class, be the authority on that.
I'm gay. I am actually pansexual. Jump down, and then say some fucking gay shit. I'm gay.
That sure is based.
Freddy, dinner is ready. Come eat your broccoli. I had it steamed extra long so it's soft and easier to chew. Do you want your carrots to be soft too? Honey? My sweet little honey bun? I'm not hearing anything. Are you playing with yourself again, honey?
A stands for asexual, which I kind of agree with. Like, that kind of is a sexuality.
What is
The
that?
whole point of it is that you don't have a sexuality. You're attracted to none of the genders.
But that's bisexual.
No, then you're attracted to both genders.
But
if you're asexual, you're attracted to none of them.
But
if you're straight, you're attracted to one gender. If you're gay, you can also be attracted to one gender. If you're bi, you're attracted to 2 genders. And if you're asexual, then you're attracted to 0 genders.
But they will always be alone.
It doesn't mean that they don't experience love. They love people. They can have love relationships in other ways. It's not like...
But how? Like with a fucking watermelon or what?
Maybe it is in there somewhere now, but no.
Anyway, I'm guessing I don't have to explain why that's dumb, so we're just gonna move on. I mean, I guess it wasn't that bad. It looks like I am trying to understand it. But you know what? None of this even compares to what I'm about to show you next. This may be the worst joke I've ever made. I mean, maybe not as bad as the chicken one, but anyway, prepare. Especially if you're non-binary, prepare for raw cringe.
We're gonna go off this like real non-binary man. Which gender do you choose from?
Which gender do you choose from? Which gender do you choose from? Why did I say that? Why in the good name of fucking Peter Kropotkin did I say that? Oh, a fucking helicopter joke. Yeah, I was pretty ambiphobic. I mean, not that that says much because most people kinda are, but I really had like no respect for non-binary people at the time. Kind of funny that I thought that I was somehow not the stupid one, considering I didn't even know what binary meant. Especially gender binary, I couldn't even be fucked to look it up. But when you search it, you see that it's actually a completely normal and widely recognized word. Gender binary is a classification of the 2 opposite forms of masculine and feminine, whether by social system or cultural belief. Knowing that, it makes perfect sense to me why someone would identify as non-binary. But moving on from that, let's talk about the next video that references anti-SJWs, which is Grown Teen Angst, from 17 February 2019. Oh, 2019. Well, I guess that brings us to 2019. I guess 2019 is where I kind of got tired of the anti-SJW genre. I mean, before talking about the infamous vape shop employee meltdown clip, I even say this.
Now, before you say anything, no, I'm not a goddamn anti-SJW channel. Don't you dare label me that. I will hunt you down, stone cold stunner you, you absolute troglodyte. Look, I just like making fun of fucking cave howler, and you have those on every political spectrum.
But I did make one stupid mistake. Right here.
If you don't know, BetterHelp was exploiting the press and helpless people and stealing their money because, you know, they don't have it bad enough already. Andy Warski made a video about it. I strongly advise you to go watch it. Link in bio.
I literally promoted Andy Warski, a white supremacist, on my channel.
This is what a nigger looks like. Like, you know, there are black people, and then there are niggers. This is a definition of a nigger in the making.
Holy shit. What? You called them a chimp? And I really definitely of nigger in the making. Yeah. Everyone, 1488. 1488, spam chat.
I don't think there's a better YouTuber to recommend if you want to brainwash normies into the alt-right pipeline. I even put him in the description, but luckily I don't have to worry about that anymore, because the account has been terminated. Last one. The GameStop transgender. I do have some regret about this video, Maybe not with anything that I in particular said, but just with the overall sentiment of the video. I kind of side with Tiffany now. It's a very complicated issue, and if you want my full opinion on it, I suggest you check out this video.